absolutely. I mean, it was not just one toxic hit of oil and then dealing with the aftermath. It was fresh oil every day, just spewing uncontrolled for almost 3 months straight. Fresh toxic chemicals sprayed from the air. And then there were the same lies, the same government industry collusion where, oh, no, Exxon Valdez was only, 11 million gallons. It's actually closer to 35 million gallons. Down in the Gulf, it was like, oh, no, we're not spilling anything. Oh, well, would you believe 5,000 barrels a day? How about, 15,000 barrels? And now it turns out it's closer to like 100,000 barrels a day, every day. And then there was the carcasses. With Exxon Valdez, we realized pretty quickly that the more carcasses were collected, the more damages we'd be able to prove in court, the state and the federal government, because, I mean, the American people, we all own the eagles, the whales, the sea turtles, the dolphins. So if somebody causes harm to them, then there's supposed to be compensation for that. But you got to have the carcasses to kind of prove it. So with Exxon Valdez, carcasses were disappearing. Well, it was nothing like what happened in the Gulf. I mean, I got reports of what I call death dryers, where people offshore working would call me and say, okay, here's the lat, long. Get a plane, get some, night vision cameras, and get out here because we're boom, these carcasses, too many birds to count, too many sea turtles to count, thousands of dolphins. They're dead. We're taking them out to sea in barges and releasing them. Come and get photographs. And there's actually some video footage of this. But, I mean, carcasses were disappearing. Evidence was disappearing. And then people started getting sick. And still to this day, the federal government is in denial that the levels were high enough to cause...
No. The federal government's not in denial. The federal government is actively participating in a cover-up. It's not about denial. I don't think there's anything innocent about it, that they just don't believe it. I think that it's in interests of the government that... Yeah, I think so, too. I think there's breaks. I think the people on the ground know what's going on, and I think the information is just not getting relayed up. I saw this with Exxon Valdez, where the top leaders can honestly say, oh, no, dispersant spraying was stopped on May 22nd, corrects at 9527. Oh, no, 9500 was stopped in July, and it's not. It's not. It's still ongoing. Let me check with you on some things, because I honestly don't know. I'm not an expert. You are. Now, when the gusher started, it's not a spill. It's not a leak. It was a gusher. It's I heard the term oil-cano for oil volcano, which I thought was good.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
I was of the opinion when it happened that we do not possess the technology to stop such a release of oil, considering the pressure the Earth exerts. Yet we're told a scant 3 months after the incident that the volcano has been capped and all is well. Is that actually true? Or has it just been redirected and it's going someplace else? We're told it's been capped. Can it really have been capped?
Okay, there's a website I can suggest that you all go to. It's not www. It just starts with Phoenix Rising from the Gulf, .wordpress.com. And it just surfaced last week, new information on it. It's a diagram, actually a series of diagrams by geologists and petroleum engineers about probably what happened in the Gulf. And this latest series of diagrams, also backed with real-time photographs of the seabed floor in the Gulf, makes sense to me, unfortunately. Back in May, if you recall, there was very brief coverage of a Russian submersible that was down, and they freaked out. They were like, oh, my God, the seabed floor is fractured. It's leaking in more than one place. We're doomed, basically. And those stories were wham, shut down. And everybody in the Gulf kind of wondered about that. And then, of course, the president declared a moratorium, 6 months on deep shore drilling, and then that all opened again, and everything was kind of back to business as usual until last week. And first, our president says, he pulls all new leases off the table for 7 years. And he says, we're going to proceed very cautiously with existing ones. And I thought, what the heck scared the president so bad that he actually is standing up to the oil company? companies. And then all of a sudden this phoenix rising from the Gulf with these diagrams, and I'm just like, oh no. And basically the diagrams and the photographs show that the tapping of this well at the surface, the top of the blowout preventer, actually put the pressure had nowhere to go. It was spouting up through the vertical conduit of the well. And meanwhile, the seabed floor underneath had fractured from drilling so deeply. And the oil that was, still in the reservoir under pressure is looking for a place to exit now that the well is tapped. And it is pushing up through the fault lines, through the seabed floor, fracturing. And as the hot oil burns or passes through the methane layers, which are kind of the capping layers right at the sea floor level, it's melting the methane hydrate and increasing the release of methane into the Gulf, along with uncontrolled seeping of oil. And in fact, universities have measured an incredible increase of methane in the Gulf, which should have stopped when the well stopped, was tapped, and it is not. So this phoenix rising from the Gulf is sort of this plea to, does anybody know internationally how to deal with this? Because there's a couple of photographs show where the cement grouting and the methane hydrate are coming up to the surface, and they're like collecting along the fault lines, and they're collecting in craters that have refilled as the reservoirs deplete. There's like craters formed, but then they're being refilled on the surface with these methane hydrates and grout and cement.
It sounds like
scary.
Well, it sounds like I was right that we don't have the technology to stop this. And if I am correct, if there's nothing we can do, what are the long-term damages? What's going to happen down there? It's eating away now at the planet itself. I mean, what's going to happen down there if nothing can be done?
Well, here's the thing. I spent like half a day, I think it was Saturday a week ago, when I first read this article in depth and realized that, okay, this connects a bunch of the dots that were sort of floating around in my mind. And it's like, what if this is really what's happening? I mean, oh my God. And so I would say at best what we have right now is an evolving story. And it's best that we don't turn our back on the Gulf at all. We need to be paying attention. I think what happened is the story prematurely got shut down by the midterm elections in our country, and it would likely stay shut down, except for the fact that 21 years difference between Exxon Valdez and the Gulf, the BP blowout, is that there's much more independent media, documentary, indie film type filmmakers, and books that are in rapid fire press.
Well,
all this is going to be coming out on the 1 year anniversary, and I think it can drag this story back in, given that there's so many sick people.
What do you, as a scientist, as somebody who actually understands what's going on, what do you think? Okay, and I'm not looking for best scenario or worst scenario. What do you think will happen if the problems there right now cannot be addressed?
Well, here's what I've got teams of students looking at. One is what's going to happen to the ecosystem. So like in Princely and Sound, we knew we take out the herring, the key cornerstone species, and the whole ecosystem collapsed. In the warm water Gulf ecosystem, there are more key cornerstone species. So when are they spawning? When are the eggs and the young life forms in the water? Now, let's just assume that everything in May, June, July, August, and probably September, because the ocean was still full of oil despite, all these proclamations that everything was better. So just take out all the young life, because young life is very, very sensitive to oil and dispersant. So now, what are the long-lived species and what are the shorter-lived species? There's going to be holes in the ecosystem when species don't come back. Are these holes sufficient where they might line up where the whole ecosystem collapses. I don't know that yet. I do anticipate at a minimum there's going to be species gone missing. Now, whether they're, key species for the economy or the ecosystem, I don't know that yet. I'm supposed to go back and look at what the institutes have mapped out. It
is possible that the damage could be so substantial that the entire ecosystem, the domino effect, interrupts the food chain and everything. That is possible.
It could be. So that's one evolving story. The second one is, literally, I believe that everybody along the coastline was exposed to dangerous levels of dangerous chemicals. So oil, dispersants, still ongoing, even bioengineered bacteria, and dangerous levels meaning that there's going to be health problems. And there already is a chemical illness, I call it epidemic, of respiratory problems, skin rashes, central nervous system problems. I mean, there are hundreds of people seeking lawyers, seeking medical help, and I think one of the reasons I'm going back down in January through April, what the people want in the Gulf is they want a long-term, 20-year minimum epidemiology study where the people are followed and monitored and also, of course, treated. And in Alaska, we had a mental health study that has lasted now, well, it's terminating next year, so it will be 22 years. So I'd like to see that mental health study sort of approach, but expanded to include physical health as well. And I think there's going to be a lot of sick people.
Do people at least know that the food and the water that comes from the Gulf is not necessarily safe to eat or drink?
The fishermen know it, and the federal government is trying to do and the state, a darn good PR job to try to say, hey, the seafood's fine, the water's fine, come on down. I couldn't believe it down there. The fishermen are very, very skeptical. They think the fisheries was opened prematurely. The federal government opened it. One of the qualifiers was 30 days oil-free at the surface. And the fishermen all pointed out, we don't fish at the surface.
Yeah, exactly. Rikki, we're just about out of time. We're just about out of time. I'm going to give out the websites in a second. But very important, is it possible? Can we reverse the damage done by this disaster?
I think that's going to take time. What I would really like people to do is keep calling their local media stations saying, I want stories, I want this story followed. I want to know what's happening in the Gulf. Because I still think that this Gulf disaster has the potential to have all Americans shrieking with one voice, we need to get off oil.
All right.
It's going to take time in the Gulf to recover.
And that is it for this hour of the Global Freedom Report. My guest has been Dr. Rikki Ott. She's got a website, www.rikkiott.com. That's RIKIOTT.com. Also, there is a blog page, phoenixrisingfromthegulf.wordpress.com. Rikki, thanks for being with us, and God bless you in the work you're doing down there.
Well, you're very welcome, and all eyes on the Gulf. It's way too early to forget it.